What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing something that I would like to start doing a little bit more often, which is not necessarily like fine edited videos that are of the most top-notch quality, but more so just creating open discussions and relaying some of my thoughts and just kind of speaking my mind about things. It's kind of cool that I have the ability to do so, and I think that for you guys it could be something that might give you things to consider as opposed to just feeding you answers, if that makes sense. So today I wanted to talk about Beatblock. It's something that we all have. It's something that can be one of the most frustrating things that we have to overcome, and I've seen a ton of different ways to overcome that, yet I feel like all of our personal struggles within overcoming quote-unquote Beatblock is kind of unique in its own right. So today I'm going to offer a little bit of a different approach. And rather than saying, here's how, here's one way how you can beat Beatblock, here's another way that you can try to overcome it, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things to help us identify where our Beatblock comes from. So one thing that I want to pitch to you guys is the idea of artistry. And it was something that I was speaking to my instructor about, Sifu Joel, and we were talking about the open end of artistry, or the open end of the journey that we're on. Now, for one thing that you guys will never hear me say is I will never claim to be a master, or if I hear that somebody is a master or whatever, it kind of is difficult for me to take that serious, because for me personally, if you become a master, that means that you can't get any better, and I think that it totally defeats the purpose of what art is in the first place. Whether or not you agree with that is totally fine. It's just the philosophy that I tend to take. And the reason why is because, for me, the open end of artistry in its own right, whether it be through martial arts, tricking, or music, or all the things that I do in life, is that the mountain keeps increasing. And for some people, you have this moment in time where we take a look at the mountain, and whenever we look up, we just start to see how much higher it really is. And in fact, it's ever growing, but sometimes you can see a lot further up than where you used to see, and that can be pretty overwhelming. If you think about that in regards to how a song is made, I always say that every song that you finish, regardless of your skill level, is a miracle. Think about how many decisions have to go in the right way and have to come together from your mind, or you and someone else's mind, or whatever, to put something together in that way. And it's it's a beautiful thing. So I hope that for all of you guys that are trying to make these kinds of advancements in your own artistry are taking the time to appreciate yourselves as well, because again, like I said, a lot has to go right in order for these things to come together. So within that, though, the whole point of that is within sometimes seeing the mountain of how many things have to go right, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And for me, that was one thing that I ran into whenever I finished my first EP and was like, well, now I need to do better. And I was like, but wait, I've already done so much. Like, how could I possibly even fit more information in that? And the thing that I kind of came back to was a problem-solving methodology that I've kind of integrated within martial arts. And that's basically the 4 principles of JKD. Now, the only one that I'm really going to cover is always think hit. And that basically is a mindset of no matter what you're doing, the goal of any kind of problem obviously is to solve it. So if you're always thinking of being on the offensive or being proactive, then it's going to help you, as stated before, be proactive to solving the kinds of issues that you run into. If you tend to take something in a passive manner, then it's very easy for you to kind of stop and then let things kind of pile on you and overwhelm you in that manner. Think of it like if somebody tosses you the football and the other team is coming at you, if you are constantly striding towards the goal, you might get tackled, but if you stop, then everybody on the opposite team is going to come and just bum rush you and dogpile you, right? We don't want that. So always have that mindset of thinking about moving forward, about making those choices in the first place. So with all these, there's basically 3 principles. I might have said 4 earlier in the video, but there's actually 3 principles, or 3 things that I ran into that caused Beatblock for me. And the first one that we're going to cover is choice paralysis. And I think that where this comes from is the lack of accessing our imagination. I don't know if you guys know what flow is, but it's basically flow state, or that seamless moment of you being completely present in that exact moment, and that's sometimes a very difficult thing to achieve, especially when you have a lot of things going on around you. I tend to get really frustrated at my dogs because like if I'm in the zone or I'm really trying to concentrate and my dogs like bark or whatever, it totally breaks that sense of flow that I'm trying to access. So within all that stuff, within these choices and stuff, a lot of times it comes into not knowing where to go next. And one thing that I'd like to kind of ask you to consider whenever you guys are coming into your choice paralysis is to really identify or try to think about what your track needs in order for you to feel like it's, you know, either worth finishing, or at what point can you get within your track to know that you can actually complete it. Maybe, you know, you're really good at writing a bass line, but your transitions aren't very good. Or maybe you're really good at writing bridges and intros, but likewise your drops aren't very good. So that basically will help you identify those weaknesses that you have within your, I guess, songwriting skills or even your sound design skills, XYZ, because it can be anything. And from that point on, you can go into the next phase, which is kind of like the next thing that follows into. For me, let's say I'm trying to create a sound or whatever, and I am trying to sound like this other artist, but I am lacking the technical skills, which is the second thing. And I can't sound like this person, or my tracks don't sound up to quality or up to par as the people that I look up to. You have to consider that every artist is unique, and there's only one of those specific artists, including yourself. So while it's good to take inspiration from these people that you look up to and whatnot, it's more important that you figure out how to tell the stories that your mind and your inner artist yourself is trying to say. That's not to say, though, that you can't dive into extensive research on how those things are done. Even with music theory, right? Some people have these motives, or some people have these particular styles of music that is written in more so in a musical or classical sense that has some kind of vocabulary. That's kind of what it comes down to, is like, you know, none of you guys would know what a neurobass is had that name not really kind of come about. You'd just be like, oh, well, it's kind of this person's type of bass, right? Or even for a dubstep bass or for a genre. Imagine if music was completely genreless. Some people really argue about that idea, about too many genres, about too many things and all that, but from a producer sense, it can really help us identify some of the things that we're trying to create when we don't know where to look. And lucky for you guys, YouTube exists, and hopefully I'm covering all the things with heavy music that you guys want to learn about, although that would be pretty arrogant to say that I cover all of them. But you have a lot more access via the internet to find those skills that you're looking for, and I guarantee that they exist. And if you don't, then go find somebody who does. It's the internet. If you really look up to an artist, go reach out to them and ask them for lessons, or see if they can point you in the right direction. What are they going to say? No? Of course, you know, be respectful about it. If you've watched my producer etiquette video, then that's something to consider as well, and be sure to compensate them for it. But, you know, that's the best education that you can get. At least in my opinion. I really think that, how do I say, apprenticeships in one way or another, or mentorships, is the best way to learn how to sound like somebody else. So I'm not saying everybody go flood everyone's DMs and stuff. You should be proactive on your own, but, you know, if somebody's willing to teach you, then great. So one thing that I really came into last year was that during the extensive research period, I was learning so many skills, and one thing that really set my brain off to this was I was watching a Jaws masterclass video, and he said, I was learning so much while I was at the Icon Collective School. Is it Icon Collective? While at the Icon School, that I didn't know how to apply it, and all my music sounded terrible. And so one thing that you'll have to consider whenever you're doing these kinds of things is that just because you know and you have all the tools doesn't mean that you necessarily have the imagination to kind of apply some of these things, if that makes sense. You've made some really cool basses, you've made some really cool sounds, but you don't have the imagination to cultivate that and to kind of like put that into practice. And so that's kind of where that third part of that Beatblock comes in, yeah? So how we fix that is, instead of trying to write tunes, we compartmentalize these things into smaller sections. We have to realize that music does take practice, but it goes beyond I practice sound design until I get good sounds, and then I practice making a song. There's so many things that go into songwriting that you can kind of break down into little bits of sections and stuff that you can definitely practice. And that's something that will actually help improve your skills in a lot of different ways and challenge your imagination. It's just about how well you can break those components down. For example, if you just figured out how to make some really cool basses, rather than going, oh, okay, I've got a bass and I'm going to make a tune out of it, practice making a few different main sections, or from what the young kids call drops, right? Instead of just writing one and then being like, oh man, now I have to make a song out of it, we'll write another drop, and then write another one, and then write another one, and then write another one. If you've already got a set of source sounds to use, it's kind of like taking a sample pack and reapplying it and seeing how many different ways that you can rearrange it. And you'd be surprised at these umbrella skills that we're practicing that will kind of lead into all the other components of making music. And then, which has happened to me several times, let's say you practice making a few different main sections and they all sound good. Well, guess what? You've just made the main sections to a song. And if they all sound a little bit different, then you've created a narrative. And suddenly, that mountain that seemed so high has kind of already been completed through just working, through just staying busy, through making those choices. So if you don't know the choices that you have to make, then you can't really advance on, and that's kind of why I have this on a tier system of like where this choice paralysis comes from. If you start with one compartment about what it takes to make a song, we'll pick out what your favorite thing is. You know, most people say that their favorite parts of a song are the main sections, but some people like the change up, or some people like the bridge because that's like usually where the emotional part of the tune is, especially if you make like trance or something, right? So my advice is, if you don't have the imagination, then you need to practice. You need to practice building imagination. You need to take your sounds that you're making right now, regardless of the quality that they are, and figure out how to make your sounds that you're making instead of taking somebody else's, and start applying them within your own things. And when you practice in that manner and you take away the pressure of having to make a whole tune out of it, then you're just building yourself up, and you're building these skills, and you're building these other potential drills that you're doing for yourself that will allow you to kind of overcome that in a certain sense. So within all that stuff, I'm not saying that if you follow these three, or if you tackle these three problems that you're going to overcome Beatblock, but I wanted to relay my personal journey on this of like not being able to write anything for about a year and a half to finishing 6 or 7 songs within a span of 2 months. And some people really helped me out on that, indirectly and directly. And finally something just clicked. And I can say that if you continue to practice without the pressure of having to sound like somebody or having to be up to a particular quality, then I think that it will help relieve you and help you enjoy doing what is supposed to be fun in the first place. So to kind of summarize things, the big thing that honestly helped me, which is why I've put a tune out, or why I've made a video on it before, is the Wolg video that he recently put out. And one thing that clicked with me within that wasn't necessarily what he was doing, because I knew how to do a lot of the things that he was putting into practice. But what I realized was that a lot of the struggles that I was trying to make was that I was trying to put too many musical ideas together to create this crazy complex narrative. And what it helped me figure out was, in my opinion, I feel like drum design is my strong suit. I feel like bass design is my strong suit, and glitchy cut things are something that I really enjoy to do. So with this new EP that I'm working on that's coming out soon, while it may not be musical by any means, I had so much fun writing it because I didn't have to worry about trying to force something into it, and I was able to let that go, even though I had a feeling that, it wasn't going to sound great, or even though I wasn't concerned with it being the highest of quality. It was just writing. And I've made a video on this before about, defeating your ego and stuff like that, but it's kind of goes beyond that in some cases. It's just not even like, it's just exploring new things. And when you're in a state of exploration, you can't have your ego because it doesn't do anything for you, so it's easier to dismiss. So for you guys, maybe something that you can try in the future as well is to try to write atonal music, try to write a track with maybe just drums and percussion. Resampling is great. And then you kind of get into all those ideas that these people tackle within those certain mindsets of well, hey, try this, and hey, try this. And if they work, then great. And if they don't work, guess what? You found some tricks that might come back later that you might want to try on purpose, as opposed to even just having Beatblock. So that's kind of my ideas for you guys, and that's kind of my thoughts on this whole thing about like where Beatblock comes from. It's definitely real, and for those of you guys who are struggling with it, I feel for you. And I am making this video in hopes that I never go back to having Beatblock, but if it does happen, at least I'll have this video. So it's just for me, it's for me just as much as it is for you. But if you guys have questions, or if you guys have other things that you want to bring up, I would like to start a discussion with it. And that's kind of the point of these videos. It's not necessarily to be controversial, it's just to like be personal from an artist to another, to talk to you all about what's going on in your lives and what are you going through within your musical journey. If you guys have other topics that you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comment sections, or there's actually a Discord channel, which there's always a link to in every video. And if you guys feel like you want to be helpful or generous, then please consider either donating or joining the Patreon, as I got some cool things coming up in the coming months for you guys as well. So thanks guys, I appreciate you listening to this 16-ish minute video, and I hope that you guys are all well. Hit me up if you have any questions, and I hope to hear from you. Happy producing, everybody.